Good morning, everyone. Welcome to Story Time. Today's book is The Smartest Giant in Town, written by Julia Donaldson and illustrated by Axel Scheffler. George was a giant, the scruffiest giant in town. He always wore the same pair of old brown sandals and the same old patched up gown. I wish I wasn't the scruffiest giant in town, he said. But one day, George noticed a new shop. It was full of smart clothes. He found a smart shirt, smart trousers, a smart belt, smart tie, smart socks, and smart shoes. Now I'm the smartest giant in town, he said. George left his old clothes behind at the shop. He was about to go home when he heard a sound. On the pavement stood a giraffe who was sniffing sadly. What's the matter? Asked George. Oh, it's my neck, said the giraffe. It's so very long and so very cold. I wish I had a warm scarf. Cheer up, said George, and he took off his stripy tie. It didn't match my socks anyway, he said, as he wound it round and around the giraffe's neck. It made a wonderful scarf. Thank you, said the giraffe. As George strode towards home, he sang to himself, My tie is a scarf for a cold giraffe, but look at me up and down. I'm the smartest giant in town. George came to a river. On a boat stood a goat who was bleating loudly. What's the matter? Asked George. It's my sail, said the goat. It blew away in a storm. I wish I had a strong new sail for my boat. Cheer up, said George, and he took up his new white shirt. It kept coming untucked anyway, he said, as he tied it to the mast of the goat's boat. It made a magnificent sail. Thank you, said the goat. George strode on, singing to himself. My tie is a scarf for a cold giraffe. My shirt's on a boat as a sail for a goat. But look at me up and down. I'm the smartest giant in town. George came to a tiny ruined house. Beside the house stood a white mouse with lots of baby mice. They were all squeaking. What's the matter? Asked George. It's our house, squeaked the mother mouse. It burnt down and now we have nowhere to live. I wish I had a nice new house. Cheer up, said George, and he took off one of his shiny shoes. It was giving me blisters anyway, he said, as the mouse and her baby scrambled inside. The shoe made a perfect home for them. Thank you, they all squeaked. George had to hop along the road now, but he didn't mind. As he hopped, he sang to himself. My tie is a scarf for a cold giraffe. My shirt's on a boat as a sail for a goat. My shoe is a house for a little white mouse. But look at me up and down. I'm the smartest giant in town. George came to a campsite. Beside a tent stood a fox who was crying. What's the matter? Asked George. Oh, it's my sleeping bag, said the fox. I dropped it in a puddle. I wish I had a warm, dry sleeping bag. Cheer up, said George, and he took off one of his socks with the diamond up the side. It was tickling my toes anyway, he said. The fox snuggled into it. It made a very fine sleeping bag. Thank you, said the fox. George hopped on, singing to himself. My tie is a scarf for a cold giraffe. My shirt's on a boat as a sail for a goat. My shoe is a house for a little white mouse. One of my socks is a bed for a fox. But look at me up and down. I'm the smartest giant in town. George came to a squelchy bog. Beside the bog stood a dog who was howling. "What's the matter?" asked George. "It's this bag," said the dog. "Sorry, it's the bog," said the dog. "I need to get across, but I keep getting stuck in the mud. I wish there was a safe, dry path." "Cheer up," said George, and he took off his smart new belt. "You were squishing my tummy anyway," he said, as he laid it down over the bog. It made an excellent pathway. "Thank you," said the dog. The wind started to blow, but George didn't mind. He hopped along, singing to himself. "My tie is a scarf for a cold giraffe. My shirt's on a boat as a sail for a goat. My shoe is a house for a little white mouse. One of my socks is a bed for a fox. My boat helped a dog who was crossing a bog, but my trousers are falling down. I'm the coldest giant in town." Suddenly, George felt sad and shivery and not at all smart. He stood on one foot and thought, I have to go back to the shop and buy some more clothes. He turned around and hopped all the way back to the shop. But when he got there, the shop was closed. "Oh no," cried George. He sunk down onto the doorstep and a tear ran down his nose. He felt as sad as all the animals he had met on his journey. Then, out of the corner of his eye, he saw a bag with something familiar poking out the top. George took a closer look. "My gown," he yelled. "My dear old gown and sandals." George put them on. He felt wonderfully comfortable. "I'm the coziest giant in town," he cried, and he danced back home along the road. Outside his front door stood all the animals he had helped. They were carrying an enormous present. "Come on, George," they said. "Open it." George untied the ribbon. Inside was a beautiful gold paper crown and a card. "Look inside the card, George," said the animals. George put the crown on his head and opened the card. Inside it said, "Your tie's a scarf for a cold giraffe. Your shirt's on a boat as a sail for a goat. Your shoe is a house for a little white mouse. One of your socks is a bed for a fox. Your belt helped a dog who was crossing a bog. So here is a very fine crown to go with your sandals and gown of the kindest giant in town." The end. Oh, what a fantastically kind person George the Giant was. No matter who he ran into, he would help everyone and anyone he could. And you know what? Everyone who he helped was so thankful for George's kindness. Maybe that's something that we can all do today. While we're playing today, while we're at home, let's see if anyone needs our help. And if we can see that someone needs our help, let's give them all the help we can give them. Let's be the kindest, friendliest, most helpful people we can be. We can be just like George the Giant, who was ever so helpful. Let's see how many times we can be helpful. Maybe it can be a challenge for us. See how many times we can help the people in our lives. Well, I know what I'll be doing today. I'm going to try and be as helpful as I can. I hope you're going to be as helpful as you can at home as well. Until our next story time though, I'll see you later. Bye everyone.